My name is Victor Fuhrman. Some call me the Voice. I've always been fascinated with human nature, spirituality, science, and the crossroads at which they meet. Join me now and we will explore these topics and so much more with fascinating guests, authors, and experts who will guide us to Destination Unlimited. As many as 1/3 of people recovering from COVID-19 are showing symptoms of long hauler syndrome, including chronic fatigue and brain fog. These debilitating conditions mirror post-viral chronic fatigue syndrome, which, along with fibromyalgia, was considered a mystery ailment by most of traditional medicine with no path to treatment. Is there hope for those who suffer with these conditions? My guest this week on Destination Unlimited, Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, has been a pioneer in the treatment of these conditions for more than 40 years and says with his SHINE protocols, patients will go from fatigued to fantastic. Jacob Teitelbaum, MD, is a board-certified internist and nationally known expert in the fields of chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, sleep, and pain. He has authored numerous books, including the best-selling From Fatigue to Fantastic, The Fatigue and Fibromyalgia Solution, Pain-Free 123, 3 Steps to Happiness, Healing Through Joy, the Beat Sugar Addiction Now series, Real Cause, Real Cure, Diabetes is Optional, and the popular free smartphone app Cures A to Z. He's the lead author of 6 studies on the effective treatment of fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue syndrome, and a study on effective treatment for autism using NAET. Dr. Teitelbaum has been interviewed and quoted in hundreds of local and national magazines, newspapers, websites, podcasts, and television programs, with appearances including Good Morning America, CNN, Fox News Channel, The Dr. Oz Show, and Oprah and Friends. His website is vitality101.com, and he joins me this week to share the just-published 4th edition of his life-changing book, From Fatigued to Fantastic. Please join me in welcoming to Destination Unlimited Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. Welcome, Dr. T.
Victor, it's awesome being with you and with your listeners today.
And awesome having you with us. Please share your early path, your call to medicine, and how your personal challenges shaped your practice.
So it's the old, what's a nice Jewish doctor like you doing in a field like holistic health and
there you
chronic
go.
Fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. I got into it the old-fashioned way. I had it. Basically in medical school, I had paid my way through college. My dad was dead, so I was paying my own way through college, finished college easily in 3 years. And then was speeding my way through med school. That was the easy part of my life. But there was a family meltdown. I came from a old concentration camp family that, and community that had been in Auschwitz, and it went through meltdown, and I tried to be the mediator. And that was a mistake. Emotionally, I was not very emotionally mature, going to an all-boys yeshiva or school all the way through high school made that a challenge. But basically I came down with what I call the drop-dead flu. All of that is the context, because most of you who have this illness will find that whatever triggered it, it was in the context of there really being an energy drain that was going on. I had the drop-dead flu, which knocked me out of medical school. I was not functional. And since I was paying my own way, I was homeless, sleeping in parks. And it was funny. It was as if the universe put a holistic homeless medical school sign on my park bench. Naturopaths came by, herbalists came by, energy workers and chakra workers came by. Holistic doctors came by, and they would teach me what I needed, not only to recover, but to begin developing an effective treatment for most people. That's what I'm doing over the last 45 years. So this is a passion. We all have our jobs and our goals and our passion. Mine is effective treatment for 50 million people in a system that just ignores them.
Wonderful, and thank you for that. Thank you so much. When we look back to when From Fatigue to Fantastic was first published, much of the book and your work dealt with chronic fatigue syndrome and fibromyalgia. For those who have heard of these disorders but are not familiar with them, please share with us what life is like for those affected.
Miserable. Simple way to tell if you have fibromyalgia, chronic fatigue syndrome, as opposed to this day-to-day fatigue, is the paradox of inability to get a good night's sleep, even though you're exhausted. So either you have trouble falling asleep, staying asleep, or you wake up feeling like you didn't sleep. And so tired, achy, brain fog, can't sleep. If that sounds like you've got the process. And about 20% will not have the pain. They just have tight muscles. So again, that sounds like you. It does not go away with vacation. It's been more than 3 months. Presume you have chronic fatigue syndrome, fibromyalgia, even if you have lupus or multiple sclerosis or other things, because in autoimmune illnesses, the severe ones, about a third of people will come down with a secondary fibromyalgia, which also needs to be treated. So it's an energy crisis where people essentially trip a circuit breaker. That circuit controls sleep, so you can't sleep. Your hormones are off whack, despite normal blood tests, temperature regulation, blood pressure, and pulse.
Now, I've been experiencing actually a couple of those things recently, and we'll touch upon that later in the interview. What are the latest statistics on how many Americans suffer with these disorders, and are there others who do but go undiagnosed?
Well, 85% of people who have it have not received the correct diagnosis. They've been told you're depressed, you're anxious. Generally, many doctors took the attitude of, I don't know what's wrong with you, so you're crazy, which is abusive, by the way. It's totally unacceptable. So we're looking in real life at about 12 million Americans who have the illnesses. About half of those in a mild to moderate form, or they kind of skirt the edges of the diagnostic criteria. We're also looking at about 3.5 to 7 million more cases that are coming because of COVID, because you see the post-COVID symptoms, which, as Dr. Fauci has noted, is simply post-viral chronic fatigue syndrome. And it's estimated that will get about 3.5 to 7 million Americans.
And we'll touch upon that a little bit later also in the interview. Let me ask you something, though. People go undiagnosed. What was the medical community's response to these conditions when you first wrote the book, and has it changed during your practice?
Well, again, the main approach was it's very complex. It does not fit the patterns of symptoms we expect, and therefore you're crazy. And it's helpful to understand, Victor, that as with most immune illnesses, 3/4 of people who have them are female. And to understand the medical mindset, even with half of doctors being women, but the women are not in power. The medical mindset is transparent when you look at the word hysteria. Hysteria is a medical term. And if you look at the root, it comes from the word hystero, which is Latin for uterus. So basically, uterus is equated with hysteria. And we see that multiple sclerosis used to be called hysterical paralysis. Lupus was a neurosis. Even rheumatoid arthritis was considered that. Fibromyalgia is going through the same pattern. So back when I wrote the book, most doctors treated people with the disease like they were crazy. Now you have more doctors who are appropriately saying, I'm sorry, I don't know what's wrong with you, and let's see if we can find somebody who does, instead of saying, I don't know what's wrong with you, so you're crazy. But I'll tell you, for those of you listening, if you go to the doctor and they're implying to you and your family that you're crazy because they don't know what's wrong with you, let me recommend you do this. You stand up, you walk over to the doctor, you look him in the eye, you bend over, you kiss him on top of the head, you say, thank you, doctor, for letting me know what a complete and utter asshole you are, so I don't waste my time with you. Turn around, walk out the door, slam it if you'd like on the way out, look at the people in the waiting room, say, this man is a dangerous quack, and leave. That is abusive. It is totally unacceptable to say, I don't know what's wrong with you, or even imply that I don't know what's wrong with you and you're crazy.
If men had uteruses, would things be different?
You'll find that men are treated differently. If with a man, it's, I'm sorry, Joe, I don't know what's wrong with you, but well, let's find a specialist. With women, it's, I don't know what's wrong with you, you're crazy. So if men were women, yes, then men would be treated the same way.
The protocol you offer for both of these conditions in From Fatigue to Fantastic is called SHINE. What does each letter stand for, and how may those who follow it literally rise and shine?
Well, it's funny because it used to be the Shin protocol. It's a Jewish letter, but nobody knew what it was except me, I think. And then Dr. Oz, who's a friend of mine, he said, "Well, all good what they're saying, but prove it." And he sent somebody to me, and he's a lieutenant. She was a lieutenant in the Air Force, and he said, "Get her well." A month later, she was well. He said, "Okay, now you can come on the show." But she's the one who added the E to SHIN. That exercise is able and made it shine. And shine stands for S is for sleep. You need to optimize sleep. And many of you with the disease will say, there's no way I can get 8 hours sleep. And I will say, having treated thousands of people with this condition, yes, you can. We'll show you how. H is for hormones. And remember, the circuit breaker you trip controls sleep and hormone function. So thyroid, adrenal, ovarian, testicular, and others all have to be addressed despite normal testing. I is for infections. N is nutrition, and E is for exercise as able. And for the H, I'm going to add hypotension, or what's called orthostatic intolerance, or POTS. So that's an add-on to the H. For exercise, it's not, if you do too much, you will crash and burn and be bedridden for 3 days. But if you do none, you'll decondition. So even a simple walking program as able.
And you basically told me before we started that people with these conditions, if they follow this protocol, what's going to happen?
Well, what our double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study of the protocol showed is that 91% of people improved, with an average 90% increase in quality of life. Now, there's another ramification of that the placebo group did not improve significantly, proves also that this is a real disease. People say, "Oh, well, they got better because they weren't sick in the first place." No, the placebo group did not get better. The active group did. So not just is this a very treatable disease, it's a very real disease, and it is now optional.
And what are some of the things that our listeners can do? They're going to buy your book, obviously, but what are the things they can do right away, right now, as they're listening to our show tonight to start getting into this protocol?
Well, let's start with the physical components, and then we may want to talk about the psychospiritual components. The S for sleep. This is not a sleep hygiene issue, although sleep hygiene is good. A good melatonin. There's one at Walgreens or in Amazon. It's Nature's Bounty Dual Spectrum, 5 milligram. It works much better than the other ones. You can find it on Amazon for anywhere from $6 to $30. The $6 one is the exact same one. Look and you'll find out. There's a mix of herbs, two mixes, Revitalizing Sleep Formula and Terrific Z's, ZZZZ. Both of those are very good. Hemp oil, but get a good one. There's quality control is a problem with the hemp oil because it becomes so popularized. Some companies seem to spend all their money on the labels and marketing, and what's in the bottle is nothing. So get a good quality one for the hemp oil. For the medications, very, very low doses of several things work better than a high dose of one, trazodone, Flexeril. I know that Ambien gets a bad rap and sometimes it's an issue, but for falling asleep, some people will find that helpful. But there are over 30 natural and prescription sleep aids that can be used safely. Again, low doses do better of several, better than high doses of one. You can get to sleep.
Let's touch on the melatonin for a second. That's something that the body naturally produces. Is that correct?
Correct. But again, the hypothalamic pituitary axis, the part of the brain that regulates that, is the circuit breaker that goes offline. So the hormones in general go offline, including melatonin.
Okay, so here's our sleep, the H.
Mm-hmm. H would be for hormones. And again, it's important to understand what the normal range means because most doctors don't. Most doctors would just as soon you stayed home and they just looked at the blood test and they would treat you. It's like what the person has to say is an annoyance. They rely almost entirely on the blood tests and they rely on the normal ranges, presuming that if the test is in the normal range, there's no problem. And what I love to do, because I tend to be a pain in the ass sometimes, I'll lecture to 400 or 500 doctors at a time. And I love to ask them, who in the audience knows where the normal range for the blood tests come from? And it's like 400 pair of eyes, like a deer in the headlights. It's like 400 of those looking back at me. They have no idea. where the normal range comes from. I'll tell you, it's very simple. It's a statistical term called two standard deviations. Put into English, you take 100 people, the 95% in the normal or the normal range, and the highest and lowest 2.5% are defined as abnormal. So a normal range for shoe sizes would be size 5 to 13. Now, can you imagine, Victor, if we walked into the foot doctor and we said the shoe's tight, and he said, no, it's size 6, it's normal. And that's
I'd be in trouble for sure.
It's exactly, yeah, I have my size 12. I couldn't even get my toe in the thing. The doctor would say, there's nothing wrong with you. You're crazy. The shoe is in the normal range. And again, that it's in the normal range doesn't tell you if it's okay for the person. You look at the symptoms. How do you tell if you need thyroid? Tired, achy, weight gain, cold intolerant, constipation, unexplained infertility, miscarriages. Any two of those in fibromyalgia, I am going to give the desiccated thyroid or a combination of T3 and T4 if they're vegetarian or vegan. And I will go with that and see if they feel better. And I will adjust it not to get the blood test normal, because the TSH test, this is the only test that many doctors use, is totally unreliable when you blow that circuit breaker. And I will treat. If they feel better, I will adjust it to what feels best, and that's what I'm going to leave them on. For the adrenal, which is the stress handler gland, adrenal maintains blood sugar during stress so your blood sugar doesn't plummet. So the best way to diagnose it is not with a blood test, although I do those too, but a simple question. Do you get irritable when hungry? And I'll ask the spouse, or the person that's with them, the person I'm treating, and I'll ask, do they get irritable when hungry? Is it like getting between a mama bear and her cub? If you get between him or her and that Snickers bar, uh, so that to me presume inadequate adrenal function. Very nice supplement called Adrenaplex will take care of that. There's also Smart Energy System. Both of those can be used together, which is a mix of 6 nutrients and herbals that is amazing for energy. So both of those can take care of that. For the reproductive hormones, again, the blood test will not go abnormal until you've been estrogen and progesterone deficient for 5 to 12 years. So you can't rely on those. How do you tell? If your fibromyalgia symptoms are worse around your menses, you get more headache, more insomnia, more achiness, more brain fog, less energy around your menses, then low estrogen or progesterone are contributing, and you need the bioidentical, not the poison that the pharmaceutical companies were pushing because it was patentable, but the bioidenticals. And this is how you go. There's other hormones as well.
And the eye.
Eye would be infections, the most important infection. There's certainly numerous ones that can trigger disease, Lyme disease, Epstein-Barr, a host of different viral, parasitic, bacterial infections. But the most important one to treat, because these organisms are so massive and most people with fibromyalgia have it, would be Candida. That's yeast overgrowth. And I do that by starving them, having to avoid sugar. We want to cut back sugar. Stevia is okay. You want to use a good probiotic. I like the ones that are in a pearl form because it keeps them from dying with the stomach acid. There's a number of good probiotics. There's a number of natural ways to kill the yeast. And I will use the medication diflucan. The way you diagnose it, there's not a test that I would give a nickel for. The diagnosis is based, do you have nasal congestion, postnasal drip, chronic sinusitis, and or irritable bowel syndrome, gas, bloating, diarrhea, or constipation. If you have these in fibromyalgia, I will treat for the Candida.
And the N.
N is nutritional support. And again, you want to avoid being part of the handful club where you have to take handfuls of vitamins and minerals all day. There's a simple powder called the Energy Revitalization System. Right now, that's only available on my website because it got back ordered because of COVID, but usually it's on Amazon also. So the Energy Revitalization System, it's a powder. It has 50 key nutrients at optimal levels. Pretty much everything you should be getting from the diet except for the calories, with the exception of iron and essential fatty acids. Most of the rest are in there. And it literally, I will put out this challenge to people. I mean, I lecture I've lectured to hundreds of MD and PhD nutritionists, at their annual conferences. I say, if you can get what's in that one drink in less than 50 pills, I'd give them up $100. Nobody's been able to do it. So that's a good foundation for supplementation. In terms of diet, cut sugar, increase salt. If you salt restrict with this disease, you will crash and burn unless you have heart failure. For high blood pressure, salt restriction has a very minimal effect. It will decrease blood pressure 2 millimeters. That's what the studies show. But for high blood pressure, you can look at my Cures A to Z app, and it's a free app. It'll have what to do for that. So you want to increase salt, cut back sugar, increase water. I know you drink like a fish, but you pee like a racehorse because the hormone that holds on to water is low. And then you want to eat what leaves you feeling the best. There's no one diet for everybody. Now, people ask, is a vegetarian or vegan diet healthy? For some people, it's incredibly healthy. For other people, they're sick as dogs and weak and pasty on it. What works for you? That will tell you better than any expert. So that's as simple for that. In terms of other nutrients, I mentioned the Smart Energy System, which goes really well with the energy revitalization system. We just finished a study on red ginseng. It's a HRG 80 red ginseng, 181 people in the study. And what we saw was 60% improved with a dramatic increase. I mean, there's like 70% increase in energy and quality of life. We did 2 other studies in the last year, and both of these also looked at post-viral fatigue using a supplement called recovery factors. But the recovery factors, and I mentioned Adrenaplex for adrenal, those are both animal-based. So for those of you that are strict vegetarian or vegan, know that there are other alternatives for the Adrenaplex. There's nothing else for the recovery factor. So, but the recovery factors is a bipeptide, tripeptide mix, and it's just amazing. It helps rebuild the body. That one's from Europe. You have to go to recoveryfactors.com. It can be found there. So these are the foundations, some coenzyme Q10, but take it with food. Then I'll go with the acetyl-L-carnitine. I will check iron. If the ferritin level is under 60, that's the iron test. I will treat with iron. And there are a number of nutrients, but these are the key ones. And these are ones that even just starting a number of these on your own can have a dramatic impact on improving energy, cognition, and for pain. I'll use a curcumin, boswellia, DLPA, and nattokinase mix called Curamin. Now, I don't take money from any of these companies. I do have some skin in the game for the recovery factors and Smart Energy System, but all the other ones, my royalties for even advisory board or designing, I'll go to charity. So I'm very picky about brands and companies. I'll do it from dozens of companies, but I tend to be very picky when it matters. So these are things people can do on their own. There's a lot people can do on their own to get well.
And we've got about a minute left in the segment. We've been through the shin. Let's add the E.
Exercise is able. You do too much, you'll crash and burn. Don't sit there and say, well, I'm going to resolve to go and work out tomorrow, because you'll be in bed for 3 days. Start with the walking. Do as much walking as you can, whether it's across the room or a block or 2 or even more. See what's comfortable, and then leave it at that level for the 8 weeks. After 8 to 10 weeks on the protocol, your energy production will be skyrocketing, and then instead of crashing, you'll start to condition. Then you can add 50 steps every 1 to 3 days. There's all kind of apps that you can use, or an even old-fashioned pedometer, and it doesn't have to be exact. And then you just slowly work up and listen to your body and see what it's comfortable with.
My guest is Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. His book is called From Fatigue to Fantastic. Dr. T, please tell our listeners where they can get your book, this book, and other books, and find out more about you.
Well, I've got my 10 books out, and you can find them all on Amazon. And be sure, if you get Fatigue to Fantastic, that to get the blue cover. There's many editions. It's been out since 1995. Get the blue cover edition. Also, I do treat people worldwide. And for information, my website is, you can go to www.vitality101.com for health information, or www.fatigue.com, where I carry supplements.
And we'll be back with more of Dr. T and From Fatigue to Fantastic after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
The cutting edge of conscious radio, OMTimes Radio, IOM FM. OMTimes Magazine is one of the leading online content providers of positivity, wellness, and personal empowerment. A philanthropic organization, their net proceeds are funneled to support worldwide charity initiatives via Humanity Healing International. Through their commitment to creating community and providing conscious content, they aspire to uplift humanity on a global scale. OMTimes, co-creating a more conscious lifestyle.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. We're talking about his work and his book, From Fatigue to Fantastic. From Fatigue to Fantastic offers advice for those who suffer with inflammation and how proper nutrition can not only reduce inflammation, but also boost immunity. I think we touched on that briefly in the past segment. Please share some more.
Well, I think especially these days, optimizing immunity is especially important. And in modern life in general, there's a big trend towards increased inflammation. So inflammation is not bad. It's an important, healthy part of immunity. But what you want to do is balance it so that your immune system can work well and so that you don't end up with a bunch of pain and other things. So optimizing and balancing inflammation. Number one, cut down the sugar. Sugar is a major driver. It doesn't mean you can't have sugar. Chocolate is a health food. But again, have it in moderation. Save your sugar calories, your sugar budget for what gives you the most pleasure. Go for quality, not quantity, and savor it. White flour, another major problem. For the animal proteins, again, the meats tend to be more inflammatory. Fish is anti-inflammatory for the fish oils. I'm not talking about the fried fish at Mickey D's. That's not going to help. But the fish oils are good. Grass-fed beef is less inflammatory than grain-fed beef. So if you're going to eat meat, go with the grass-fed. If you don't eat the meat, and if you're pescatarian and the fish oil, you're probably in good shape if you keep the sugar down. But again, simple things can make a big difference. In terms of herbals, curcumin, very powerful. The problem is that if you look at turmeric is only 2% curcumin, which is the active part, and a very small percent of curcumin gets absorbed. So to get most of the benefits of curcumin took massive doses. But there's new technology. They found that if they add the essential oil from the turmeric called turmerone back to the curcumin, it increased absorption 693% in the studies. So one pill suddenly replaces 7 curcumin or 350 turmeric pills. So for the form of that, I will use, if somebody has pain, I will use Curamin, Curamin, which has been a pain relief miracle for people. I tell them give it 6 weeks to see the full effect. If they're just looking for the other properties of curcumin or to balance inflammation, I will go with Curamed, Curamed. And again, I take that myself. I feel fantastic. As I mentioned before the show, I feel like I'm 31, so that's how old I am. Although I was born in 1952, but I'm 31 because that's how I feel. I take one Curamed myself just because the health benefits are so high. I take a 750. It's funny, even for mood, it was more effective than Zoloft. And I think 3 head-on studies now using that form, the curcumin. The boswellia, which is basically frankincense, is the other name for that, helps with lung and colon or bowel inflammation. So it's very good for that. The Curamin has both of those together. The mix of willow bark and cherry can be very effective for those of you with joint pain. I will use Curamin plus something called N-Pain, and in severe cases, a third one called B-Mobile, which has the glucosamine chondroitin. So again, these pain is optional. I've been teaching pain doctors for even before there's a specialty in pain medicine. I've been doing that as part of what I do for many, many decades. And I can count on I have to go to my toes now, how many people in the thousands I've treated with chronic pain that I've not been able to get good solid pain relief. But pain is very treatable unless you go to your regular doctor because they have no training by and large.
You talk, I think, between 7 and 10 different types of pain in your book, correct?
Yeah, there's 7 main kinds of pain. And the book goes through each kind and how to address it. The things you mentioned, like the Fuhrman, those are good in general. That's my go-to for just general pain because it's wonderful. But again, whether you have reflex sympathetic dystrophy, now called CRPS, finely treatable, the central sensitization, very treatable. There's all the different kinds of pain. And again, the book, and I have another old book, Pain Free 123, but I think the Fatigue's fantastic, is much more up to date. It goes through each kind of pain and will tell you how to make it go away.
We touched upon this a little earlier. One recent change for me personally has been a little issue with insufficient sleep. I meditate regularly. I have a very calm disposition. I'm very conscious of what and when I eat. But the past few months have found me waking up a few times during the night. This seems to be affecting others that I know also. What would you suggest?
Well, it depends. If you wake up feeling refreshed and you feel good, then that's fine. You know, the average night's sleep in the United States until light bulbs were invented about 150 years ago was 9 hours a night. That'll give you kind of a touchstone about what a normal, healthy night's sleep is. But some people do fine on 6, some need 10 or 12. So first of all, how do you feel? If you feel okay the next morning, it's not an issue. For waking up in the middle of the night, there are a couple very common things that do that. One would be a drop in blood sugar. That's because especially if you get irritable and hungry during the day, that adrenal fatigue, we talked about the adrenoplex for that in the morning, but sometimes the cortisol has trouble dropping to go so you can go to sleep. So you're irritable all day or intermittently. At nighttime, you can't fall asleep because your mind is racing. It's wired but tired. You're exhausted all day, and finally 10 at night, suddenly your mind's wide awake. For that, phosphatidylserine, 200 milligrams or so, taken 90 minutes before bedtime, will bring it. The brand doesn't matter for that. They'll bring it down so you can fall asleep. And then waking in the middle of the night, that process also includes then the blood sugar plummets during sleep. And the simple way to begin addressing that is by eating a protein. And I'm going to underline in bold protein, like a hard-boiled egg, some meat, some fish, some cheese, but whatever it is, protein snack, 1 to 2 ounces before bedtime to maintain your blood sugar. Try that for a few nights. If it helps, then you know that that's what the cause of it was. Very common, people will get acid reflux at nighttime. And you can simply take a Pepsid at bedtime is the easy way. You can do it without medicine with potassium bicarbonate, which is more of a nutrient. Melatonin decreases nighttime acid reflux. But if you find that you're getting acid reflux or waking with sweats, a third very common thing would be candida overgrowth, which will make people wake with sweats also, not if you wake with a sweat. And then the hormones, estrogen, progesterone, testosterone in men. Men go through menopause, just like women go through menopause. So using the bioidentical hormones, if you're of an age where, and 45 or higher in women, and again, if symptoms, I'm not talking about PMS irritability, but other symptoms are worse around your menses, then it may be time to start looking at bioidenticals, see if that helps the sleep. For men, the testosterone in the bioidentical form.
One more golden age condition that seems to be affecting more of the recent generations, brain fog. What is it, and how may we address this?
Well, brain fog, there's a number of different things with that. And again, a lot of people are worried. In CFS and fibro, it tends to reflect as difficulty with word finding or word substitution. And you can see that just in the general population too. You have to understand, when we're 10 years old, our hard drive, so to speak, and our body's memory may have had, not a whole lot in it. So if you want to go search for a name or a tag, it got found pretty quickly. By the time you get up in 60 years of age, you have many more gigabytes of memory to search through. So finding names, finding the labels for things takes longer. And sometimes it's not in random access memory, it's in hard drive where it has to send a search and it'll come back 10 minutes later. That's just normal because you have a lot of stuff in your memory. Look at, people are afraid, oh my God, it's, I walk in the kitchen, and I keep forgetting what I went in for. Yeah, you did that when you were 15 too. You just didn't worry about it. So a simple thing that I say, this is not Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's is not when you forget where you left the keys. Alzheimer's is when you forget how to use the keys. If your reasoning is intact, don't worry if even if somebody you know well, you stumble on the name for a while. Just as long as the reasoning is intact, you're fine. Now, the things that I talk about, the energy revitalization system especially, the omega-3s, and what I use for omega-3s is Vectomega, because again, one pill will replace 7 big fish oil pills. So you can tell, Victor, I'm very picky about which things I use. So the Vectomega, very important for memory. Most of the brain is made of the fish oils. That's why it used to be called brain food. So these simple things: B vitamins, magnesium, the energy revitalization system, vitamin powder has all of that. The omega-3s, if you do just those two and you get your sleep, that's going to make a big difference for most people.
I am closely related to someone who's on a gluten-free, dairy-free, and I often kid her, taste-free diet. Mm-hmm. She's also extremely sensitive to odors, especially household chemicals. What suggestions would my wife, that person, find in your work?
Well, there's going to be a lot. There's a chapter that I have sensitive to everything. And that will go through how to get rid of and assess the sensitivities. But again, the gluten, we're seeing, it's funny that the staff of life for most of human history was wheat, on bread, has turned out to be the stuff of allergies. And it's, it talks about our modern day life where the enzymes present in the food are destroyed in food processing. We have decreased stomach acid, so we're not digesting the food. And then we have leaky gut associated with candida overgrowth and the use of arthritis medications like ibuprofen, increased leaky gut. So we're seeing that combination is setting people up for food allergies. There's something else going on with the gluten, though, because there's a significant number of people who find that they don't have gluten, and it's a pain to avoid gluten. And they don't do it just because they think, well, I should. They do it because when they eat gluten, they feel miserable. So she's doing the right thing because for her, that's what works. But the book will talk about food allergies. It'll talk about using an energy technique called NAET to eliminate them. One of the studies, we have a number of studies we published in our research center. One of them was using an acupressure technique called NAET for autism. And 23 of the 30 autistic kids were back in regular school after 1 year, as opposed to none of the control group being back in regular school. So addressing the food sensitivities is a very important thing. But all these things, addressing, and then adrenal would be the next piece of that. You address adrenal, digestion, and many people find their food allergies go away.
Thank you for that. As someone who's been on a spiritual path most of my life, I know the importance of a strong spiritual connection as a key to my health on all levels. In your book, you discuss emotional and spiritual optimization. Please share this with our listeners.
Well, let's start with the basics. We talk about CFS and fibromyalgia being an energy crisis, where people are spending more energy than they're able to make, and they trip a circuit breaker. And just like there's hundreds of ways to trip a circuit breaker, there's hundreds of ways to trigger an energy crisis. It can be nutritional deficiencies, sleep deficiencies, hormonal deficiencies, infections, autoimmune problems, all kinds of ways to trip that circuit breaker. But there's a very important one, which is, every illness tends to have a psychodynamic, and it's not perfect, but you will see, for example, multiple sclerosis, people with that tend to be really nice because they tend to repress anger. Uterine cancer tends to be associated with a hopeless, helpless personality. CFS and fibromyalgia tends to be associated with people who are approval seekers. They avoid conflict to avoid losing approval. And therefore, when everybody else is going, no, they're going, okay. So if I get you well, so you can go back to what made you sick in the first place, you're going to find another way to be sick. And I learned early on, I would go ahead and people would be great and they'd be feeling great. And then they say, oh, I was doing so well, I got hit by a truck. Literally, I'm not kidding, Victor. I've heard that a number of times, and every single time it's the other person's fault. It's the truck driver's fault. The psyche will find a way to take you out of the game for the same reason it did in the first place. So, a simple rule of thumb, if you want to stay well or start getting well, is ignore your brain when it comes to whether you should do something. Check in with your feelings. Your brain does not know who you are. Your brain is like a computer. It is basically the product of your programming of school, government, newspapers, parents, church, synagogue, all that programming of what you should do to be a good boy or girl and get approval. That's what your brain is feeding back to you. Your feelings know what's authentic to you. So the way you know what's authentic is how does it feel? If something feels good, that's your psyche's way of saying, okay, I want that. I like that. Now, there's always going to be somebody who says, how about heroin? Okay. Then I add in the thing about or sugar, or ice cream sundae. And then I add in, how's it working for you? So overall, you're going to find people who do those, it doesn't work very well for them. So how does it feel? How's it working out for you? If somebody asks you when you're walking down the street and you notice everybody's ducking for cover and hiding in alleyways, and you look up and there's some energy vampire, like the chairwoman of the committee on how to waste everybody's time, walking up to you with arms open. And first they put in the hooks. Here's the hook. If not for you, I don't know what I'd do. Hook. There's no way I couldn't do it without you. Hook. Okay. It's as if people with CFS and fibromyalgia, we tend to be more empathic, and it's as if we have a big flashing sign over our head that says emotional toxic waste dump. And the people will come over and they dump all their stuff. They put the hooks in first, then they regurgitate all their stuff on you, and then they say, I feel so much better, and you feel like crap. Okay, that's a medical term, because you just took a load of it. And where everybody else is using this magic word, it's a 2-letter word, no, and when the chairwoman comes up and says, oh, we need somebody to lead the committee on how to waste everybody's time, big time, more than ever, everybody else is going, no, if she could even catch them. And you're going, your brain is going, well, if I don't do well, they need me, blah, 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 blah. And you go, okay. Then you go home and go, what did I just say okay to? So doctor's orders. Of course, I'm not giving you orders. You're your own boss. But since we live in a society that makes doctors like we should have big priest robes and a rod of power that give us authority socially. So I'm going to give this order to you so you have it as an excuse, as a doctor's order. If somebody asks you to do something and it feels bad and they're not going to get arrested or put in jail for not doing it, say no. And you can say doctor's orders, make me the bad guy. And then if they come, and then because people won't counteract, they'll go, but I really need, and then you say, but my doctor told me, are you trying to kill me? And then they'll walk away and you're free.
I love that. It's funny because that was one of my life lessons, which really I only resolved last year. And that's two things, that no is not a 4-letter word and no is a complete sentence. And that
Absolutely.
Was a long time coming. Absolutely. My guest, Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, his book, From Fatigue to Fantastic, will be back with more of Dr. T after these words on the OMTimes Radio Network.
Ascending Hearts is no ordinary dating site, but a spiritual dating site with a purpose, to link you with your soulmate. We engineer the serendipity so you can trust that you will attune with someone that has the same matching vibration as you. Ascending Hearts, the conscious dating site for the spiritually aware. Try Ascending Hearts for free, ascendinghearts.com.
Back on Destination Unlimited, my guest this week is Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum. We're talking about his book, From Fatigue to Fantastic. Dr. T, your 4th edition came out last month after more than 20 years of continuing updates, research, and success stories. It also coincides with perhaps one of the positive things that is manifested as medicine combats COVID-19. You started talking about this earlier. Please tell us more about the latest studies of COVID long hauler syndrome, how they correspond with CFS, and how they may be overcome.
Well, basically, it's the same thing. You will have literally dozens of infections, including Lyme disease, that will trigger a post-infectious chronic fatigue syndrome or ongoing infections. The COVID is just one more of these infections. And what they're finding is that people who came down with the COVID, triggered their CFS. I just had another gal that I was treating who had her follow-up just recently, and she's back to healthy again with treatment, or feeling much, much better anyway. So post-COVID persistent symptoms, and again, you look, they're the same thing: tired, achy, brain fog, uh, cold intolerant. You have the whole different mix of symptoms, paresthesias, numbness, tingling. So what we talk about with Shine is likely to be a very effective treatment for the overall post-COVID. Um, but there's other things too, because the COVID will then trigger inflammation in different areas, organs of the body. So there are some things that are important and specific. For those of you who have the post-COVID persistent symptoms, number one, if you have shortness of breath, get a pulse oximeter. You can find them on Amazon. That's a little clip you put on your finger. It'll run you about $30, but you'll make yourself a little nuts picking them out. The brand that I got is called ZAC, capital VRATE. That was a good one. The first one I got basically was inaccurate and I threw it away. So when you get short of breath, you put that little thing on your finger, you push a button. In 20 seconds, you're going to know what your oxygen saturation is, how much oxygen in the blood. If it's over 95%, the shortness of breath is not coming from your heart or lungs. And you can take a sigh, a breath of relief, even though you feel like you can't breathe. It's coming from a sense of breathlessness from either the chronic fatigue syndrome or fibromyalgia, which can cause a sense of breathlessness with plenty of oxygen, or even from the hyperventilation anxiety. So just number one, knowing, if you're 92%, 91%, there's a lung or heart issue, we'll address that. So number one, get the pulse oximeter. Number two, for the lung issues, the research shows that from ARDS or shock lung, which we see with a number of other things, not just the COVID, it routinely tends to resolve over 2 years. So your lungs are likely to get better and better, and very often will just go back to being totally healthy, even if you had the pneumonia and were on a ventilator. So that's good news that will heal up. The heart, if you look at my Cures, CURES, capital A-Z app, there's a free app, $2 upgrade. The information, look up heart disease, it's all in the free app. And it'll go through things like ribose. Ribose, by the way, is very good for overall energy, and the smart energy system has that in it. But ribose, coenzyme Q10, B vitamins, magnesium, acetylcarnitine, it's all written down in there, will dramatically improve cardiac function. So you can take care of that piece of it. For the brain, the key thing is called microglial activation. And there's a medication that you can get from compounding pharmacies by prescription called low-dose naltrexone that will tend to turn off that brain inflammation, is not the right word, but central sensitization, things like that. You'll see other things will do it too, but the low-dose naltrexone is wonderful for that. It takes 2 months to start working. So you'll see that by treating the overall SHINE protocol and then tailoring, if people have first of all, I'm going to give the Cura Med 1,500 milligrams twice a day to shut down any excessive immune activity. I'm going to rebalance immunity in the lungs and the heart, the brain, throughout the body. So the Cura Med 750 milligrams, 1 or 2 twice a day for probably about 2-3 months. I'm going to give clinical glutathione to take care of free radical issues. The vitamin powder will take care of most of the rest of the antioxidants. You do these simple things and you're going to be addressing what you need physically to recover. And then for those who had severe disease, or in the hospital, things like that, the PTSD, for those of you, many of us in the spiritual community have gone through severe traumas, severe emotional traumas as part of the fires that forged our spirit and becoming who we are. But there's a healing that's often helpful and necessary for that. And it's important to realize that talk therapy will only take you about 10-15% of the way. You have the emotional energy in the muscles that's locked in there, and that needs to be released, beginning with, you can do massage, but trembling. You're going to find there's times you feel like shaking. And most animals know naturally to shake it off, and will let that trembling happen to release the trauma energy. People feel silly trembling, so we suppress it. If you're by yourself, or let your loved one know what's happening, that this is a good thing, let the trembling happen. It'll happen here and there in waves, and you'll feel lighter and lighter each time as you release that trauma that was stored in your muscles. The trauma stored in the emotions, emotional freedom technique. It's a tapping technique, very, very good to reset the limbic system, that circuit breaker, dynamic neural retraining system. For those with severe PTSD, a technique called somatic experiencing. All of these can be found online. There's just so many things you can do to really heal. And for those who are a little more adventurous and looking at the research, I'm not recommending you do this, or at least not, it needs to be with a proper doctor and legally, is my disclaimer. Ketamine and ecstasy have both been found. A friend of mine who's Scott Shannon, who's the head of the American Holistic Medical Association, the past psychiatrist, he's principal investigator on a study looking at both. This is a government approved study looking at ketamine and ecstasy or MDMA for PTSD. And he finds it to be incredibly effective. You don't need the $1,000 per dose IV ketamine every 2 weeks, or the nasal spray for $850. Compounding pharmacists can make it for about $3 a dose.
And this really leads into my next question. One of the themes I've been focusing on in my podcast this year is self-care for caretakers and caretaker burnout. This also obviously applies to everyone who's been on the front line since the onset of the pandemic. What do you recommend for them?
Very simple thing. As I mentioned before, your feelings know what's authentic to you. So number one, when it stops feeling good, when you find yourself saying, well, I should do this, but your gut is going, no. Well, if it doesn't feel good to do it, say no, because if you don't, you will burn out and be useless to the people you want to be helping. And you say, well, if I don't help them, who's going to? Well, if you burn out or die, how are they going to manage? They find a way. They will, when you say no and honor that, and you can say yes to some things and no to others, then they will figure out another approach. So again, taking care of the caretaker in chronic disease is critical, and that means saying no when things feel bad. The nutritional things I talked about, the vitamin powder, getting your sleep, all of these things are for everybody. It's just a really solid part of maintaining optimal health. But again, listening to your own truth. How does this feel? That's the core of it.
And what about the first responders, the ones who really have difficulty saying no because it's their job?
Well, you'll find that they will, it's funny. One of the best definitions of burnout that I heard is when your soul grows too big for the role you're playing. And you will find that for the first responders, if it gets to the point, they will move on to something else, or they will, if they won't, then the body will find a way to take them out of the game because they'll get an illness.
If you had to give an elevator speech summarizing your most important finds, what would you say?
Give your body what it needs with shine and follow your bliss.
That's a really great elevator speech for those who don't know. An elevator speech is you've met someone in an elevator and had to explain your life or your career or your goals to them in 1 minute. What would you say? And I think you did that in about 11 seconds. That was wonderful. What would you like readers to take away from Fatigued to Fantastic?
I'm going to tell you that, again, most everything, there are exceptions, where the momentum of disease has gone so far that there's not much to do but just ride it out to the end. But for most illnesses, when your doctor says, I'm sorry, I can't help you, they're being honest. They can't help you because all they know is what the drug companies have been teaching them. And it's one toolkit. It's a very helpful toolkit, but it's not the biggest toolkit. And by adding in the natural therapies, the mind-body therapies, the spiritual work, I find that almost everything can be treated these days. It just blows my mind at how little can't be helped. So you got fatigue, it's optional. You got pain, it's optional. You got CFS and fibromyalgia, they're optional. You got other diseases. One of my books is diabetes is optional. There are many things. that your doctor says they can't help you, tell them thank you for being honest and find somebody who can.
Wonderful. My guest, Dr. Jacob Teitelbaum, his book, From Fatigued to Fantastic. Dr. T, one more time, please tell our listeners where they can get your books and find out all about you and the wonderful work that you bring to us.
For the books, get on Amazon, get the blue cover of From Fatigue to Fantastic. For those who would like health information, go to www.vitality101.com for CFS and fibro. But I do recommend a free phone app called Cures, CURES, capital A dash capital Z. There's a $2 upgrade, but 80% of the information is in the free app. For those who would like products that I recommend, www.end, N like Nancy, D like David, fatigue.com. For the recovery factors from Europe, that's www.recoveryfactors.com. For many chronic conditions, basically to help your body to heal, to optimize energy and increase body comfort. It's just been amazing. We've published 2 studies on that. Well, the second one has been submitted for publication. It's just rather remarkable. So there's so much you can do that can help you.
And on your main website, people can schedule consultations with you. Is that correct?
For that, you want to email appointments with an S at the end at endfatigue.com. There'll be contact information, but you don't want to use a phone, use the emails. Or let me also note, for those of you, we have free tools, treatment tools for people with CFS and fibromyalgia, for those with POTS, or the low blood pressure issues as well. You can email me for those and other information at my personal email, which is fatigue, FATIGUE, DOC @gmail.com.
Dr. T, thank you so much for joining us and sharing this wisdom and this experience and all that you bring to the world. Thank you.
Victor, my pleasure, my honor, and be well, everybody. Have fun. That's what being here is about.
Absolutely. And thank you for joining us on Destination Unlimited. I'm Victor, the Voice Fuhrman. Have a wonderful week.